Have you ever woken up at 3 a.m. and heard whispering from the other side of the room? Or seen footprints around the cabin when no one had left the house? In this video, you'll hear 3 stories. A house on an island hiding secrets behind a friend's smile. A nighttime hunting game that turned into a ritual no one dares to speak of. And an Airbnb vacation that ended with a warning from the deep forest. You don't belong here. Don't click away, because the final story is the reason you'll never sleep peacefully in an unfamiliar place again. Not all summers are warm. Some summers, despite the sun hanging high in the sky, leave you shivering whenever you remember them. The summer I turned 15 was like that. It was the summer Ron, Marcus, and I went to an island none of us had ever heard of. A place not found on any map, and perhaps a place that was never meant to exist. Ron was always the quiet one, the kind of friend who never talked much about his family, but his eyes. There was something in them that made me believe he knew things he would never say. When he told us his family owned a vacation home off the coast of Maine, I laughed. But then I saw how serious he was when he said it. There was a kind of silence clinging to his words, like someone was listening from beneath his skin. Ron's dad drove us to the ferry dock. He barely said a word except for short, barked directions. And every time I coughed or sneezed, he would glance at me through the rearview mirror with a look that made it hard to breathe. There are people whose eyes alone tell you they will never forgive you for existing. He was that kind of person. The house on the island wasn't big, but it stood tall among the gray pines, facing the sea. And even though the sky was still bright, I couldn't shake the feeling that darkness was seeping in through the window frames. The sea didn't crash. The wind didn't blow. Everything stood still, as if holding its breath. The islanders recognized Ron the moment we stepped off the dock, but no one called him Ron. They called him Ronnie Boy, in a flat, soulless tone, as if they had been waiting for him to return. As if, this time, we wouldn't be the only ones leaving. It started with the hat. Not just any hat. It was a white Real Madrid cap, so worn that the logo had faded. But to me, it was the only thing I had left from my father. He'd bought it for me on his final business trip before he died in a car accident on a foggy morning highway, a morning just as hazy as those here on the island. I was sure I had folded it, tucked it carefully into my backpack, but by the second day, it had vanished like it never existed. "I think you left it at the beach," Ron said, voice barely above a whisper. "Hats fly away easily." Marcus just shrugged, fingers tightening around the strap of his backpack like he was holding on to some secret. I didn't say anything, not because I believed them, but because I felt something beginning to fracture in the air around us. The next afternoon, while wiping down my bike frame, I noticed a fountain pen from my collection had also gone missing. I'd been a strange kid, always collecting pens, and I knew every single one remembered exactly where I placed them. The one that disappeared was the last of a vintage set of 4 Parker pens that my mother had bought from an old bookstore in Portland. Marcus glanced over as I dug through my bag, then muttered absently, "I remember seeing you with it yesterday when we biked. Might have dropped it near the pine slope." Harmless words, but his eyes weren't harmless. That night, I pretended to have a headache and went to bed early. The upstairs bedroom was silent, except for the distant hum of insects from the forest. I lay on the bottom bunk, staring at the ceiling with eyes that wouldn't close. Then, around 3 a.m., I heard whispering. At first, it was faint, like wind slipping through a crack in the door. But the more I listened, the more certain I became. It was someone speaking, very close. The sound dragged on, warped like it was coming from some old broken device. A low mumble swallowed by thick, choking darkness. I strained to hear and realized it was coming from Marcus's bed, the top bunk across from me. The terrifying part wasn't the whispering itself. It was that it wasn't just one voice. There were two. One was asking, one was answering, and neither of them was mine. I lay frozen, every cell in my body strung tight like a wire. The silence around me no longer felt peaceful. It felt like the world was trying to trap me in it. I didn't dare close my eyes, didn't dare move. All I could do was wait, until something worse decided to speak next. I pretended to be sick the next day, not because my head actually hurt, but because something had started to grow inside me, a feeling slick and cold, like the mud at the bottom of a lake. I needed to stay, needed to be alone in the cabin while Ron and Marcus went out with Ron's dad to have dinner in town. Marcus didn't say a word before leaving. He just looked at me, a long, heavy stare, not meaningful, just weighted. So heavy it felt like my sternum was caving in. Once the sound of the old truck's engine faded down the dirt road, I stood up. My heart pounded like the chest of someone trying to escape a morgue. I went straight to Marcus's bag and tore through everything. At first, I was looking for the hat, and I found it, stuffed deep in the bottom of his bag, tangled among old clothes and candy wrappers. Underneath was my fountain pen, then a toothbrush, identical to the one I'd lost, a metal nail clipper, just like the one my mom had packed for me, and a pair of my underwear, washed but no longer smelling like soap. I sank to the floor, back against the wall. A breeze drifted through the window, cold enough to numb my lips. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to clamp them between my thighs to keep them still. And then I saw the notebook. It was at the very bottom, tucked between two thick shirts. A cheap black-covered notebook, the corners curled and worn. I opened it. The first page was a pencil drawing. A human face without eyes, mouth gaping like a pit. Blood spilled down the neck. The next page showed a child hanging from a tree branch, my name written in capital letters beneath it. I kept flipping. The drawings got messier, more deranged. There were people crushed under cars, headless bodies, hands reaching out of bathroom sinks. Some pages were so heavily drawn that the paper had torn, like the artist had pressed the pencil down with a demon's rage. Near the end, I found a page, a drawing of me, nailed to a crucifix, legs severed, mouth wide open, but with no eyes. The entire face was just a blank, white void. And finally, the last page. Only 4 words, scrawled in pencil so dark it bled through to the back of the page. I will do it. Tomorrow. I didn't feel cold anymore. Only the smell of something old, decaying, waiting to come back. I brought the notebook to Ron's dad as soon as they got back. No one asked why I had stayed home, and I didn't explain. I just held the notebook out, my hand trembling like I was holding poison. Ron's father took it, silently flipping through each page. When he reached the drawing of me on the crucifix, I saw it. A slight twitch in his eye. Very subtle, but I saw it. No yelling. No questions. Just a silence so thick it felt alive. "Put it away," he said, his voice rough. Not angry exactly, but definitely not concerned. "And put everything back where it belongs." I stood still. It felt like something was crawling around my ankles, something invisible. "You should do what I said," he continued, not looking at me. "Some things aren't meant to be disturbed." I don't know why I listened. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe fear, or maybe it was the look Marcus gave me as he walked into the room, like he was staring at prey that had just exposed its throat. Before I returned the notebook, I tore out a page. The one with the drawing of me. No eyes, no legs. I hid it in the waistband of my pants, like a talisman. The next morning, Ron's dad announced we were leaving the island early due to family matters. No one asked for details. Marcus sat in the back seat between Ron and me. He didn't say a word the entire ride, but I could feel his eyes, that gaze, sliding across the back of my neck from the left every now and then. We dropped Marcus off first. As he stepped out of the car, I swear he turned back and smiled at me. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile someone gives when they forgive you for something that hasn't happened yet. I never saw Marcus again. Not at school. Not anywhere. I told my parents everything. Showed them the page I'd kept. The police were called. They went to Marcus's house, but it was empty. His family had moved out the night before. No one knew where they had gone. The whole thing faded away like thick fog. No one brought it up again. But I didn't forget. I couldn't. 3 weeks ago, I moved into a new apartment. One morning, there was an envelope in the mailbox. No name, no return address. Inside was the old fountain pen, its cap broken, but still leaking dark ink, and a small sheet of paper folded into quarters. I opened it. Just one line written in pencil. I haven't forgotten, and I'm not done. I don't know where he is, but every night before bed, I still check every drawer, and I burn the page I once held on to. That spring break, I didn't want to go to the beach. I didn't want to dance among drunk strangers or have EDM pounding inside my skull. I just wanted to get away from everything, quietly, alone. And then I found the place, a weathered cabin deep in the mountain woods near Asheville, North Carolina. Tucked among tall pines and melting early season snow, it was nearly an hour's drive from the nearest town. Suspiciously cheap, but beautiful, like something out of a travel magazine. Oakwood floors, an outdoor hot tub, a stone fireplace, and even an old-school record player with vinyls from Nat King Cole and Billie Holiday. I sent the link to my girlfriend, Emily, and she agreed instantly. Jules and Cade, our best friend couple, said yes after a single phone call. 4 of us, 1 cabin, wine, and no cell service? Perfect, Emily said, grinning like she'd just stepped into a dream. We arrived in the late afternoon, as the forest bathed in a sunset red like thinned blood. The wind rustled through the trees, producing a low, continuous whisper, like voices in a different language. The cabin smelled like damp wood. The floor creaked with every step, but it was warm, safe. At least, at first. We opened wine, lit the fireplace, and played board games. Jules burst out laughing every time Emily lost, while Cade stayed unusually quiet, frequently staring out the window. His gaze was long, as if searching for something that wasn't there. I didn't think much of it at the time. I didn't pay attention to the fact that the cabin had no curtains. The forest was dark, very dark. And that this cabin felt like a glowing box, surrounded by hundreds of eyes that had never once closed. The second night felt more comfortable. We had an early dinner, reheated pasta and buttered toast. Jules had brought a cheap bottle of wine that somehow tasted sweet when chilled. Cade seemed more at ease, laughing along with Emily as they played music on the record player. When Unforgettable came on, I remember thinking, we're really living a perfect little moment. Then we headed out to the hot tub. It was in a screened enclosure behind the cabin, right up against the forest. There was no ceiling, just a patchwork glass roof, so we soaked in hot water while gazing up at a sky full of stars. The contrast of freezing air on our faces and warm water on our skin had everyone giddy. Emily laughed. Jules told old stories, and Cade slipped back into silence. We were playing Never Have I Ever when a blinding light flashed into the enclosure. It wasn't moonlight, not a flashlight. It was white, sharp like lightning, but it lasted for nearly 5 seconds, long enough for me to see every tiny hole in the mesh screen and every speck of dust floating in the air. Then it vanished. No one said anything for several seconds. Emily whispered, "Did someone just take a picture of us?" I stood up, pulled on my shirt, and opened the door to the porch. Jules turned off the music. Cade followed me. I pointed the flashlight toward the woods. Nothing. Just thick darkness, black as velvet. Then, click. A small sound came from the left, like a metal latch snapping. Then another click from the right. Then one more, behind us. 3 directions, 3 sounds. No repetition, no rush. Just deliberate, like someone or something was circling, one slow step at a time, but without footsteps. Cade grabbed my hand. "Nathan, get back inside. Something's flanking us." I yanked the door open and signaled everyone to get back into the cabin. Emily was shaking. Jules nearly slipped as she hurried across the porch. We shut the door, locked all 3 bolts, stacked chairs against it. Cade checked the windows. I grabbed the big kitchen knife. Emily cried quietly. Jules sat down, hands wrapped around her head. And then, in the stillness, a whistle from the forest. Not playful, not melodic, just one long, low note. And an echo. We sat in silence in the living room. The 4 of us huddled around a small flashlight Jewel had found in the kitchen drawer. The fireplace had gone out, and I didn't want to turn on the main lights. I was afraid I'd see something staring back. The cabin was no longer a refuge. It felt like a glowing box, floating in a sea of darkness. The whistling continued from the woods, sometimes near, sometimes far. Sometimes it came from the left, then just seconds later, from the opposite side, as if someone, or several of them, were circling the house, in a pattern, or worse, playing with us. "They know we're scared," Cade whispered, still gripping the large kitchen knife. "They're waiting." I didn't ask what they were waiting for. I didn't want to know. Suddenly, 3 knocks on the front door, not rushed, not panicked, solid, controlled. Emily screamed. Jules clamped a hand over her mouth, whispering desperate pleas for silence. Cade edged toward the door, knife trembling in his hand. I stood behind him, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Get out!" I yelled through the door. "I have a gun! Leave now!" And the knocking stopped immediately. No one spoke for about 30 seconds. Everything went silent. Even the forest seemed to be listening. Cade turned to me, eyes wide. "Why the hell would you say you have a gun?" I didn't answer. I just felt someone had understood me. And then the glass shattered. One of the dining room windows exploded inward. Something heavy is smashing through. Glass sprayed across the wooden floor. Emily screamed. Jules collapsed into a chair, clutching her chest. I ran over to look. A large rock, about the size of 2 hands, sat among the broken shards. Wrapped around it was a piece of paper, tied with a thin, hair-like strand of rope. I unrolled it. Just 4 words, scribbled in jagged handwriting that looked like it had been written by a trembling or deranged hand. "Leave this place." No threats, no curses, no name, no signature, just a command, like a sentence passed down from somewhere behind the darkness. We stayed in that cabin for another hour. No one spoke. No more footsteps. No more whistling. No more light. Only fear. And the chilling certainty that whoever was out there was still waiting. We left the house that very night. Cade drove, his hands still trembling. Emily sat in the back seat, gripping my wrist like she was afraid that if she let go, something would pull her away. Jules didn't say a word, just stared out the window with unfocused eyes. None of us slept. None of us spoke. We drove through the dark for 2 hours until we saw the lights of town again. The police arrived shortly after. They reached the cabin around dawn, checked the house, the surrounding woods, the footprints, and the shattered windows. But they found nothing. No trace of an intruder. No security cameras. No evidence that anyone had been there except us. And the rock. The rock still sat on the floor. The note was still intact, dry, as if it had never touched snow or the dampness of night. After the initial report, the youngest officer asked me a question. "Are you sure no one in your group pulled a prank?" I looked him straight in the eye. "If one of us did, then why didn't we bring weapons? Why leave behind our stuff, the deposit, our luggage?" He didn't answer, just scribbled more notes and nodded. That afternoon, I called the property owner, Mr. Merrick Hale, an old man with a slow southern drawl. Each word was released like it had to be coaxed out of a foggy memory. When I told him everything and asked, "Do you know what happened out there?" he was silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "Those woods, they're old, son. There are things out there older than people. They don't like to be seen." I asked again, quieter this time, "Have you ever seen them?" Another pause. Then, very softly, "I learned not to look out the windows after 8 o'clock. The trip was over, but something strange lingered." A week later, I opened the camera roll on my phone to look back at the group photos from the house. There was one picture, the 4 of us in the hot tub, laughing, the music still playing. And behind the mesh screen, far into the woods, barely visible, almost blurred, there was a tall, thin figure, standing perfectly still between 2 trees. It wasn't blurry. It wasn't a shadow. It couldn't be mistaken. It was watching, and I'm certain it still is. My family isn't like other families. We don't gather for Thanksgiving to eat roast turkey, and we don't huddle around a Christmas tree singing Silent Night. We have our own tradition, a ritual that outsiders might laugh at if they heard about it. But if you've ever stood in the woods of Red Pine Hollow on a December night so cold it burns your lungs, you wouldn't be laughing. We call it Hunt Night. I'm Elias Madden, and this year I turned 18. That means I'm finally old enough to take part in the game for the first time. A coming-of-age ritual? Maybe. A way for the men in my family to prove that the predator's instinct still runs in our blood? Not wrong. But deeper than that, there was something I hadn't yet found words for. A strange silence that pressed on the air the moment the game began. The rules are simple. All men in the family, 18 and older, are given a custom military-grade laser rifle. When the clock strikes 10 p.m., everyone scatters into the forest. No lights, no maps. If you get shot, you're dead. You head back and sit by the fire in the backyard of the cabin. The last one not shot by sunrise is the winner. No alliances, no mercy. On the outside, it's a game. But on the inside, it's instinct. Our family cabin sits deep in the Vermont woods, where snow falls thick like powdered chalk and bites like old memories. Out there, phones don't get a signal, the internet doesn't exist, and the only lights come from the fireplace, or someone's eyes in the dark. That night, standing on the porch with a cold weapon in my hands, I looked up at the star-streaked sky and felt a tightness in my chest. Not because I feared being shot by someone I loved, but because I sensed that tonight, we weren't the only hunters in these woods. When the whistle blew, a sharp, metallic wail from Grandpa's old silver whistle, older than the very cabin we stayed in, everyone began to spread out into the woods. No one said a word. No one looked at each other. We simply moved, silently, like a ritual carved into our blood. Every step was firm, deliberate, as if each man carried the vague sense that this might be the last game he'd ever play. I chose the northeast path. not because of strategy, but instinct. Something, not quite a voice, but close, whispered inside my head, "Go this way." The snow was thick, silent. Every step sank down to my ankles, and the only sound was the sharp sniff of frozen breath. I moved along a shallow hillside where the trees grew dense and no other footprints were visible. Then I stopped. There was a footprint in the snow, large, just 10 paces ahead. Not mine, not from anyone in the family. I knew the shape of everyone's boots. This print was too long, the foot too wide and distorted, like it had been crushed from the inside. I bent down. There were no returning prints, just a single trail going deeper into the forest. I didn't want to follow it, but my feet moved anyway. One step, then another. I raised my laser rifle and gave the flashlight a quick test flash. A narrow beam shot out, then died, just enough to see ahead, and I saw it. A tall figure standing behind a birch tree, unmoving, no light, no weapon. Its head tilted slightly, like it was listening to me breathe. I flicked the light again. The shadow was still there, but now 2 steps closer. I backed away, slipped in the snow, fell. By the time I scrambled back to my feet, it was gone. No sound, no new footprints. The snow remained untouched. Suddenly, the radio on my belt crackled to life. A burst of static pierced my ears, followed by a single blood-curdling scream. Unmistakably, Uncle Seth's voice. No one else could scream like that, just once. Then silence. I called out, "Uncle Seth? Can you hear me? Were you hit?" No reply. I turned and ran, back up the slope. Snow clawed at my face. My hands were numb, but I ran. Not because I feared losing the game, but because I knew something was following me, and it didn't leave footprints. I ran until my chest ached like someone was squeezing each heartbeat in their palm, until the lights from the cabin pierced through the tree trunks, black as the forest's spine. I stopped to breathe, back pressed against an old pine tree, palms gripping the rifle so hard that blood welled beneath my nails. Everything around me was eerily silent. No wind, no snowfall, no footsteps, only a sound, so faint it was nearly meaningless, dripping into my head like water falling onto rusted metal. I wasn't sure if I was really hearing it or just imagining, but that sound, it didn't feel human. It was like something I'd heard in some forgotten place, like moans echoing from a basement, like a child's whimpering in an abandoned house. Then, in the dark ahead, a laser light flickered. Someone was nearby. I jumped up, aiming my rifle, heart pounding like a war drum. The laser was pointed straight at me. I didn't have time to dodge. My sensor beeped. Beep, a sharp signal. I was dead in the game. Dead. Just a game, right? But the strange part was, the laser didn't turn off. It kept shining directly onto my chest. No blinking, no movement. "Come on," I muttered. "Cut it out. Caleb? Uncle?" No response. I stepped closer. The beam still shone, but no one was holding the rifle. It stood upright in the snow as if someone had placed it there, or as if it had grown from the ground itself. I stood still, staring at the gun. Behind the tree on the other side, a footprint, large, twisted, like the foot had been broken inward. And then I heard breathing. Not mine. It wasn't coming from in front of me or behind me. It was inside my head. I spun around, flashing the light in every direction. Nothing. But every time the beam passed over the trees, I felt something had just moved. Just barely dodged the light, like the forest was playing hide and seek. When I swept the light to the left, I saw them. 2 figures standing side by side in the dark, nearly 2 meters tall. No flashlights, no motion. Faces pale as snow, but no eyes. I froze. The flashlight trembled in my hand. One of them raised a hand. Not fast, not sudden, just deliberate, and pointed directly at me. And then I heard it. For the first time, a voice, real and cold, echoing between layers of snow like frozen steel. "You're next." I don't remember how I started running, only that with every step I took, something else moved alongside me, slithering through the snow like a breath swelling beneath the ground. I sprinted toward the cabin like a lone survivor escaping an avalanche. My breath came out in thick clouds, lungs stabbing with every inhale. Snow clung to my eyelashes, and behind me, something was still following, silent, but close. There were no footsteps, but I knew. The cabin appeared in the faint glow of the porch light. I screamed. The door burst open, and Uncle Caleb rushed out, shotgun in hand. He didn't say a word, just raised the gun and fired 3 rounds into the sky. The blasts echoed like funeral drums. I collapsed on the steps, my vision blurred, but I still saw it. A tall shadow standing still at the forest's edge, almost invisible against the falling snow, but just clear enough for me to see. It was watching. No eyes, but it was watching. Everyone rushed out. My mother screamed when she saw me, bloody and panicked. They dragged me inside while Uncle Caleb remained at the door, gun aimed at where it had stood. But when he shined the flashlight, there was nothing. Only a line of enormous footprints, deep and steady, leading out of the woods. No return trail. The next morning, I woke up to pale gray sunlight and the noisy laughter of my family in the kitchen. No one mentioned what happened the night before. I asked, "Where's Uncle Seth?" Every head turned toward me, as if I'd just spoken the name of someone who never existed. No one remembered that he had joined Hunt Night. No one remembered the scream on the radio. Silently, I stepped outside the cabin, glancing back one last time. And there, on the snow-covered ground, it was a massive snowman. It stood motionless, facing the forest, holding a laser rifle, the same one Uncle Seth had taken with him. And beneath the glittering snow, a scrap of red sweater, stained with dark blood, just barely poking out. The same pattern he had worn when he left the cabin. Hunt night was over, but the winner never came back. They left the island, left the cabin, left the forest, but that thing never left. It's still there, waiting for another pair of eyes, another person, maybe you. If you've ever had a strange vacation, a sleepless night, or something you've never dared to share, tell us in the comments. Who knows? Your story might be the next video. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell before something else does it for you. We'll see you again in the next nightmare.